So this here is the section where Albert Fish is now buried, at an unmarked grave in section KPC of Flushing Cemetery. From what I can gather, because his grave is 684, it's somewhere in that area over there, but doesn't have a tombstone on it. Fish, for his sadistic ways and his monstrous behavior, his evil intent, is obviously the interest of many horror and true crime fans. But where did it all start? We're going to get into that. He was born Hamilton Howard Fish, and he actually took the name of a dead relative, Albert, which wasn't his real name. His real name was Hamilton Howard, and he would get bullied when he was a kid at the orphanage he was in. He went into an orphanage when he was 5 years old, and the kids in the orphanage would bully him. They would call him ham and eggs, and supposedly this bothered Albert a lot. And he later changed his name to Albert, again after a dead relative. And in this orphanage, the caretakers in the orphanage were very strict, and they would inflict severe punishments. Beatings with paddles and sticks and belts, things of that nature, were a regular thing. And this would become part of Albert's persona, some of his fetishes that he would not only inflict on others, but also on himself. He came back from the orphanage. He went back home when he was 9 years old and exhibited certain traits where he would eat feces, drink urine, not only his own, but from others as well. Fish was a very grotesque and nasty guy. Anyone who looks into the case of Albert Fish knows this, just how depraved he was. If there was a person who could personify depravity and evil, it was Albert Fish. Fish eventually got married and had 6 kids. He actually, by all accounts, was considered a good father to the kids. He never hurt them, never abused them. You would think a man who had such intent for others, who had such a desire to do these things to others and even to himself, he, despite that, he never did anything like that to his kids, as far as we know. But his wife did leave him with the 6 kids when she found out that he was having multiple affairs with men. And she left the 6 kids with him, and it was around this time that Fish started playing certain games with the kids. He would have them abuse him. He would play games where he would have them spank him with nail-studded paddles. Fish would show them ways of how he hurt himself by sticking needles in his groin and through his under his fingernails. Again, very sadistic, very masochistic, but never hurt his own children. In 1910, Fish was in a relationship with a mentally disabled 19-year-old man named Thomas Keaton. Fish was interested in something he saw at a museum, a bisected penis, and he took Thomas Keaton to a secluded, abandoned farmhouse where he tortured him for 2 weeks and cut off half of his penis. Fish didn't kill Thomas. He gave him $10 and left him there. No one knows what became of Thomas after this. In 1919, Fish stabbed a mentally ill boy in Georgetown, Washington. And he tried to lure Beatrice Keel, 8-year-old Beatrice Keel, away from her farmhouse. He promised her money to collect rhubarb with him. Her mother saw this and her instincts kicked in and she chased Albert away. And Albert came back later. He really wanted to get Beatrice Keel. Thankfully he didn't. But he came back later and tried to sleep in the barn and wait and lie in wait for Beatrice Keel. Her father found him and chased him away. And they gave a description of Fish to police. On July 15th of 1924, Fish murdered 8-year-old Francis McDonald. He lured him into a wooded area in Long Island, New York. He strangled Francis. He cut him up, he mutilated him, cut up his legs and abdomen, and he was hung from a tree. People described Fish, actually the nickname the Gray Man comes from Francis McDonald's mother, who actually saw Fish. She saw him walking around town mumbling to himself, and she said that everything about him looked faded and gray, that he was just a gray, drooping man. And she said that he was mumbling to himself and that he was moving his hands in a weird motion. And this is where the nickname the Gray Man comes from. It's from Francis McDonald's mother, one of Fish's victims. In 1927, Billy Gaffney and Billy Beaton were playing together, and Fish took Gaffney. Beaton was found on a roof by himself, alive and unharmed. They asked Billy Beaton what had happened to Billy Gaffney, where he was, and he said the boogeyman took him. Witnesses reported seeing Billy Gaffney on a trolley with a man who fit Fish's description, and said that they saw Gaffney crying and that the man was trying to shush him, trying to quiet him down. This was the last that anybody had seen of Billy Gaffney, but not the last that people have heard of him. Gaffney, Fish admitted after his trial, when he was eventually caught, admitted to the murder of Gaffney, and he went into detail about what he did to him. And it's pretty gruesome. He admitted to killing, butchering, and eating Gaffney. Again, what he admitted, what he said, was pretty gruesome, and just shows you, again, the sadist and depraved nature of Albert Fish. In 1928, Fish lured another 2 boys to his apartment, and while they were playing in his apartment, they were wrestling. They came across, they bumped into a mattress as they were wrestling, and when the mattress moved, they saw what Fish called his implements of hell: knife, saw, handsaw, and cleaver. The boys, although young, their instincts kicked in and they knew something was wrong. And they got out of there. On June 3rd in 1928, Fish takes Grace Budd. He first wanted to kill Grace Budd's brother, actually, who was an 18-year-old who put an ad out in the papers that he was looking for work. Fish went to the Budd family on the pretense that he was a farmer and could use the extra hand. But upon seeing Grace, he immediately set his sights on her, became interested in her, and chose instead to murder Grace. He came back to the family's residence sometime later with strawberries and pot cheese that he said was fresh from his farm. He told the family that there was a birthday party of his niece that he wanted to take Grace to, that he had a niece around the same age as 10-year-old Grace, wanted to take her to this birthday party. And the family agreed, even though Fish was a stranger, but they agreed for some reason. That was the last they had ever seen of Grace Budd. It would be about 6 years later when Fish gave a detailed note to the Budd family describing what happened to Grace. He took her to a cottage in upstate New York, Wisteria Cottage, where he said he butchered and ate her. That it took 9 days for him to butcher and completely eat Grace Budd's body. He said that he waited he went upstairs to a room in the cottage where he took off his clothes so he wouldn't get any blood on it. And when he called her in, she became frightened and he set upon her and murdered her. He also spoke in the note of a supposed friend of his who he said was a sailor and who told him about eating children in China during a famine. Detective King persisted on trying to find Fish, even though there was very little to go on and there were no real leads. Detective King didn't give up. And he kept looking for anything he could find to get to the bottom of it. With the Grace Budd letter, 6 years later, he found something. The paper that the letter was written on, the note about Grace Budd, belonged to the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. Detective King questioned about 400 employees from this association and really got no leads, except for one who said that he did take some papers and he left it at a certain boarding house. When they checked the boarding house, the landlord at the boarding house told them that someone fitting the description of Fish actually did stay there, wasn't there at the time, but came back periodically to collect a check, that his son was staying there, and that he kept coming back every now and then to collect a check. Of course, detectives told the landlord if this individual ever came back to give them a call. That's what happened, and this led to the capture and conviction of the gray man, the boogeyman, Albert Fish. On December 13th in 1934, the landlady of the boarding house calls detectives and tells them that he's there. They show up and surprise Fish. They show up with guns drawn. Fish actually tries to attack the detectives with a straight razor that he had, and they put him down easily. He was no match. Again, he was a frail old man, and they find multiple razors on him, and they take him in. On March 11th in 1935, Fish's trial begins. It takes 10 days, and he's sentenced to the electric chair, Old Sparky, in Sing Sing prison, where he's put to death on January 16th in 1936. And that was the end of the infamous, sadistic, masochistic, gray man, Albert Fish. So that was the end of Fish, and it brings us here to section KPC in Flushing Cemetery, where this monster now lays in an unmarked grave somewhere beyond those tombstones. Doing the research about Fish, you really find out some very troubling and disturbing details. And it's no wonder that his case piques the interest of horror and true crime enthusiasts. But we need to remember that this was not fiction. This was no fairy tale. Fish was a real life monster. Fish embodied everything that was wrong with humanity, if you can call him human. He really was the boogeyman. Fish, it surprises me. Some of the things about Fish, he, aside from eating feces and drinking urine and the things he would embed into his body, the nails and pins, all kinds of things that he would do to himself. He would also, I forgot to mention this before, but he would also light wool on fire in his anus. The things that Fish did. Sometimes we hear about these murderers who do things to people, some very cruel and sadistic things, but Fish not only enjoyed doing this to others, he did things like that to himself as well. What kind of monster do you deal with when you have someone who, you could say, oh, well, how would you like it if it was done to you? But Fish actually did. He actually did enjoy things like that being done to him. He would have his children do it to him. He would do it to himself. He really was just a disgusting, perverted person. And that's going to end it for today's video. I hope you like this one. Do like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. I'm going to do more research on more cases. And I want to do more of these walk and talks. I like doing this. I like going through graveyards, walking through cemeteries. And this one is absolutely beautiful. So that's going to be it for this one. I'll see you in the next one. Stay slashing.